Lady, if you don't open this door right now, my little girl's going to die on your porch. Grace Mitchell stared at the blood. The stranger's white shirt was soaked through. The 7-year-old in his arms wasn't breathing right. And somewhere deep in Grace's gut, a voice was screaming, "Don't let him in, Grace. Don't you dare let him in." She let him in anyway. She had $32 in her checking account, an eviction notice on her kitchen table, and she was about to open her front door to the most feared mafia boss on the entire East Coast. And she didn't even know it yet. Before we go any further, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, tap the bell so you don't miss a single chapter. And down in the comments, tell me what city you're watching from tonight. I love seeing just how far these stories travel. Now, let's begin. The knock came 3 times. Hard, desperate, like someone was trying to punch a hole through the wood. Grace Mitchell's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Nobody knocked on her door, not anymore. Not since her husband died. Not since the bank started sending men in cheap suits with clipboards. Not since the neighbors had stopped waving. "Who on earth?" she whispered. The knock came again, louder. "Please, please, somebody, anybody open the door." A man's voice, cracked wide open. The kind of voice Grace had heard 1,000 times in the ER. The voice of someone seconds away from losing everything. Grace set the cup down. Her eyes moved just for a second to the eviction notice lying face up on her kitchen table. 30 days to vacate. She swallowed hard. "Grace," she muttered to herself, "you are a woman alone in a house on a dirt road. You watch the news. You know what happens. Don't you open that door. Don't you dare open that door." And then she heard it, the sound that would haunt her for the rest of her life. A child, coughing, wet and rattling and wrong. The kind of cough that meant something was shutting down. Grace Mitchell, 34 years old, widowed, broke exhausted and one bank letter away from sleeping in her car, unlocked the deadbolt. She pulled the door open, and the first thing she saw was the blood. It was everywhere, down the front of his white dress shirt, on his hands, smeared across the little girl's nightgown, pooling on the welcome mat where he stood swaying in the rain. "Oh my God," Grace breathed. "Please." The man's voice was barely there. "I've been driving for 2 hours. Every hospital is full. 40-minute wait," they said. 40 minutes. "She doesn't have 40 minutes, lady. I saw your porch light. I saw the cross on your wall through the window. Please, please, I'm begging you. Bring her in." "What? Bring her in, right now. Don't just stand there." He staggered forward. Grace caught his elbow before his knees buckled. "Couch," she ordered. "Lay her on the couch, head flat. Don't tilt it. Don't." But he already knew. He laid the little girl down with a gentleness that didn't match a single other thing about him. Grace's hands were moving before her brain caught up. 2 fingers to the neck, pulse thready, lips the color of a winter sky. "Name," Grace snapped. "What?" "Her name. Tell me her name." "Mia. Her name is Mia." "How old is Mia?" 7. She just turned 7. "Allergies, medications. Anything I need to know." "She has asthma and some kind of lung thing, the doctor said, if she ever gets a really bad fever." "Sir." He was talking too fast. His hands were shaking. His eyes weren't focused. "Sir, look at me." He looked at her, and for the first time Grace actually saw him. Dark hair plastered to his forehead, a jaw like a man who didn't smile much, eyes that were somehow both ice cold and falling apart all at once. A man who did not belong on her porch, did not belong in her living room, did not belong anywhere within 100 miles of her quiet little life. "I was a nurse for 11 years, Grace said. "Pediatric intensive care. I know exactly what I'm doing. But I need you to take a breath, just one breath, and answer me honestly. Is that blood on your shirt yours or hers?" The man looked down at his chest. He blinked like he'd forgotten the shirt existed. "Mine," he said quietly. "It's mine." "From what?" He didn't answer. "Sir, from what?" "A disagreement with a business associate." Grace's hands went still. She looked up at him, slowly, and some old buried instinct, the voice that had kept her alive through 1,000 chaotic nights in the emergency room, whispered one word inside her skull: "Run." But she couldn't run, because Mia's little chest was rattling, because her lips were already past blue and sliding toward gray. Because whatever this man was, this child hadn't done a single thing to deserve dying on a stranger's couch in the middle of a thunderstorm. Towels? Grace snapped. Kitchen, left drawer, the big white ones, now. He obeyed her instantly, not hesitantly, not awkwardly, instantly, like a man who was used to taking orders when orders were being given. That was strange. Grace filed it away and got to work. She pulled her old nursing bag out from under the couch, the one she couldn't bring herself to throw away even after she'd lost her license, and started a line of saline she'd been keeping for herself. Fever 104.3, pulse weak, oxygen terrible. Is she going to die? The man asked behind her. Not tonight, she isn't. Are you? Don't ask me that again. Every second you spend asking me that is a second I'm not working. Sit down. Shut up. Let me do my job. He sat down the way a man sits down when his legs have finally stopped holding him up. And Grace, out of the corner of her eye while she worked, watched a grown man put his face in his hands and weep without making a single sound. Not one, not a whimper, not a breath. Just silent, shuddering tears rolling down the jaw of a man who looked like he had forgotten how crying worked. Sir, Grace said softer now. What's your name? He lifted his head. Vincent, he said. Vincent Moretti. The name meant nothing to Grace. Not then. It would. Oh God, it would. But not then. For the next 40 minutes, Grace Mitchell worked the way only an old ER nurse knows how to work. Steady hands, quiet voice, 1 foot always planted in front of the panic. She sponged Mia's forehead. She cleared her airway. She whispered the same thing she had whispered to 1,000 frightened children over 11 long years. You're safe, baby. You're safe. Miss Grace has got you. Miss Grace isn't going anywhere. And slowly, painfully, impossibly, slowly, the color came back into the little girl's lips. Her breathing evened. Her fever eased. Vincent Moretti sat in the armchair in the corner with one hand pressed against a bleeding hole in his side, and he did not say a single word. He just watched his daughter like a man watching the sunrise after the longest night of his life. She's going to sleep now, Grace finally said. The worst of it has passed. I'll need to monitor her through the night, but she's going to be okay. Vincent didn't answer. Mr. Moretti, I thought I'd lost her, he whispered. On the highway. She stopped breathing, maybe 10 seconds, maybe 15, and I was driving 80 miles an hour with one hand on the wheel, and his voice broke again. I've done a lot of things in my life, Miss Grace Mitchell. Miss Grace, he swallowed hard. I've done a lot of things. Most of them I'm not proud of. But I have never, not once in 41 years on this earth, been as scared as I was on that highway tonight. Grace sat down across from him. Take off your shirt, Mr. Moretti. He blinked. Excuse me? Your shirt off now. You've been bleeding into my armchair for the last 40 minutes. And if you pass out on me, I'm going to have 2 patients instead of 1. Off. There was a long pause. And then slowly, Vincent Moretti began unbuttoning his shirt. It wasn't a stab wound. Grace had seen enough stab wounds to know. This was a bullet. Clean entry, clean exit. Through the fleshy part of the side, missing every single organ that mattered, which meant one of 2 things. Either whoever pulled the trigger got very unlucky, or whoever pulled the trigger wasn't really trying to kill him. Grace stared at the wound. She stared at it for a long, long time. Then she looked up. Mr. Moretti, she said, and her voice was very, very quiet. This is a gunshot wound. Yes. Do you want to try that business associate story again? No, man. Good, because I don't believe it. I don't imagine you do. Grace stood up. She walked past him. She walked into the kitchen. She put both hands on the counter, and she stared at the eviction notice on her kitchen table, and she tried to remember how to breathe. A gunshot wound in her living room on a man whose daughter was sleeping on her couch. God in heaven, Grace, what have you done? She walked back into the living room. I should call the police, she said. I would strongly prefer that you didn't. I bet you would. Miss Grace. No, you don't get to Miss Grace me. You don't know me. I don't know you. I opened that door for a child, not for you. So I am going to clean that wound. I am going to stitch it closed. And then I am going to sit on that couch until the sun comes up. And the second your daughter can travel, you are going to walk out of my house and never, ever come back. Am I being clear? Vincent almost smiled. It was the ghost of a smile. a tired, broken, half-dead thing. Yes, ma'am, he said. You're being very clear. Utem. She stitched him up at her kitchen table with a bottle of $3 whiskey and a sewing kit she'd bought at a dollar store 2 Christmases ago. Vincent didn't make a sound, not when she poured whiskey directly into the wound, not when she dug out a thread of cotton that had worked its way into the tissue, not when the needle slid through raw flesh for the first stitch, or the second, or the eighth. Most men yelled. Most men cursed. Most men, even the toughest ones Grace had ever worked on, made noise. Vincent Moretti just endured like a man who had been stitched up in worse places by worse people on worse nights. You've had this done before, Grace said quietly, tying off the last stitch. A few times. In a hospital. No. By a doctor. No. She stared at him. He stared back. And Grace, who had spent 11 years learning to read patients the way other women read books, understood in that long, silent moment that she had just opened her front door to something very, very far outside her ordinary life. There, she said, pulling off her gloves. You'll need real antibiotics, real sutures eventually, and probably a transfusion. You've lost a lot of blood. I'll manage. I'm sure you will. Her hands were shaking again. Delayed shock. It was always delayed shock. 11 years a nurse, and she'd never once shaken during the crisis, only after. Miss Grace. What? May I use your telephone? Grace turned slowly. Why can't you use your own? Because the people I need to call can trace mine. Her stomach dropped 6 inches. Trace it? Yes. Who traces phones, Mr. Moretti? Just one call, Miss Grace. One call to my driver to tell him where to pick us up. After that, you'll never see my face again. Grace should have said no. Every single cell in her body was screaming at her to say no. But then Mia whimpered in her sleep on the couch, and Vincent Moretti, a man Grace was now absolutely certain had killed people, turned his head at the sound. And his face went soft, soft in a way that broke something in Grace's chest. The phone is on the wall, she said. In the kitchen. She did not mean to eavesdrop. She really didn't. But the house was small, and Vincent's voice, even when he was trying to whisper, carried down the hallway. It's me. No, I'm fine. I'm stitched. A nurse did it. She's fine. She doesn't know anything. Tommy, listen. I need pickup at dawn. Off Route 9. I'll text you the mile marker from a burner. No, you don't come here before dawn. You understand me. You don't drive past this house. You don't idle on this road. This woman saved my daughter's life tonight, and I am not bringing this down on her head. Tommy, if Santino so much as breathes on this woman's house, if one of his people even looks at her mailbox, I want you to personally. Grace stepped back from the doorway. Her heart was slamming so hard against her ribs she could hear it in her ears. Santino. She knew that name. Every single person in this part of the country knew that name. It had been on the front page of the newspaper for 3 years running. It was the name the FBI couldn't pin down. The name whose trucks had been pulled off the interstate, carrying things Grace didn't want to think about. The name who had burned down an entire block in Providence 2 summers ago with 6 people still locked inside. The Santino crime family. And Vincent Moretti, this bleeding, grieving, strange man on the other side of her kitchen wall, was talking about Santino the way a man talks about his enemy. Which meant, oh dear God, which meant Vincent Moretti wasn't a victim of the Mafia. Vincent Moretti was the Mafia. Grace pressed her back flat against the hallway wall and clapped both hands over her mouth so he wouldn't hear her gasp. When Vincent stepped out of the kitchen, Grace was standing very still in the hallway, her hands still pressed against her mouth, her face the color of bone. Vincent took one look at her and stopped dead. How much did you hear? He asked quietly. Grace didn't answer. Miss Grace, how much? Enough, she whispered. Vincent closed his eyes. I see. Who are you? I think you already know. No, I need you to say it. In my house, in my living room, with my own 2 ears, I need you to say it, Vincent Moretti, because I just stitched up a bullet wound on a man whose name I overheard through a kitchen wall, and I need to know what kind of man I just let into my house. He opened his eyes. And what Grace saw in them, she would remember it for the rest of her life. It wasn't fear, it wasn't shame, it wasn't even regret. It was the bone-deep exhaustion of a man who had been pretending to be somebody else for so long, He'd almost forgotten what the truth sounded like coming out of his own mouth. "My name is Vincent Moretti," he said quietly. "I am the head of the Moretti family. I control most of the shipping on the northeastern seaboard. Some of it is legal, a great deal of it is not. The man who shot me tonight was hired by a rival family, the Santinos, who have been trying to kill me for 6 months. My daughter has been living in a safe house in Connecticut since her mother died. Tonight, someone betrayed the location of that safe house. I got her out with 40 seconds to spare. They chased me for an hour. I took 3 highways. I switched cars twice. I drove in circles until I was absolutely certain nobody was behind me. And then I saw your porch light." He took 1 step toward her. Grace took 1 step back. Vincent stopped. "Nobody followed me here, Miss Grace. I swear that on my daughter's life. You are safe. Get out. Miss Grace, get out of my house. Take your child. Take your driver. Take your organization, and you get off my porch and off my road and out of my life right now." "Mia can't travel. I don't care. She'll die if I move her now. You said so. Don't you? You said not tonight. You said you needed to monitor her through the night. Miss Grace," and now his voice cracked. "Miss Grace, please. I am not asking for me. You know I am not asking for me. I am asking for a 7-year-old child who has already lost her mother, who nearly stopped breathing in the backseat of a car tonight, whose small life has been nothing but fear and hiding and running for 6 straight months. I am asking you as a nurse, as a woman, as a human being who opened that door tonight because she heard a child cry, please, please let her sleep in your house until the sun comes up. And then I swear on every single thing I still hold sacred in this rotten world, you will never see my face again." Grace closed her eyes. She thought of her grandmother dead 6 months, who used to sit on this very couch and stroke her hair and say, "Gracie, baby, in this life the test always comes dressed up as something you'd rather say no to." She thought of Mia's blue lips. She thought of the way Vincent Moretti had wept without making a sound. "One night," she whispered. "One night. And then you're gone. Gone. And if one person comes to this house looking for you, Mr. Moretti, I will tell them everything. I will tell them your name. I will tell them about your daughter. I will tell them every single word I overheard through that kitchen wall. Do you understand me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Grace walked past him back into the living room and sat down beside sleeping Mia. She put her head in her hands. And in the dark, on a couch stained with a stranger's blood beside a sleeping child, she just pulled back from the edge. Grace Mitchell made herself a solemn, silent promise. By morning, this is over. By morning, you will forget his name. By morning, you will forget her face. By morning, tonight never happened. It was a promise she would not be able to keep. Because at 3:47 in the morning, while Vincent Moretti slept upright in her armchair, one hand still pressed against the stitches in his arm, and while little Mia breathed soft and even, for the first time in hours, the storm outside finally broke. And in the wet, dead silence that followed, a pair of headlights rolled slowly down Grace's dirt road. A black SUV, tinted windows, engine idling. It did not turn into her driveway. It did not drive past. It stopped directly across the street from her little house off Route 9, and it did not move, and it did not shut off, and a man in the passenger seat lifted a pair of binoculars to his eyes and pointed them straight at Grace Mitchell's front window. The man behind those binoculars did not work for Vincent. Grace didn't see the headlights. Not yet. She was still sitting on her couch holding a sleeping little girl's hand, telling herself over and over and over that by sunrise, every trace of tonight would be behind her. That was the last peaceful thought Grace Mitchell would have for a very long time. Maybe it was the silence. The storm had stopped. The wind had stopped. Even the crickets had stopped, and anyone who has ever lived on a country road knows what it means when the crickets stop. It means something is out there. Her eyes drifted to the front window, and her blood turned to ice. Headlights across the street. 2 glowing eyes in the dark pointed straight at her front door. "Oh God," Grace whispered. "Oh God, oh God, oh God. Miss Grace." Vincent was awake instantly. Not groggy, not confused. Awake. The kind of awake that only comes from a life spent sleeping with one eye open. "There's a car," Grace said. Her voice was shaking so badly she could barely get the words out. "Across the street. Black. Big. It's just sitting there, Vincent. It's not moving. Vincent was on his feet in half a second, one hand already going to his waistband, and Grace watched with a dull thud of horror in her stomach as he pulled out a gun she hadn't even known he was carrying. "Step away from the window," he said quietly. "Vincent, step away from the window, Miss Grace, now." She stepped away. Vincent moved to the edge of the curtain, slow, careful, the way a man moves when he has done this exact thing more times than he can count. He looked for exactly 2 seconds. Then he stepped back, and his face was the color of ash. "How long has it been there?" "I don't know. A minute. Maybe two. I wasn't watching." "Did the headlights come on after it parked, or—" "They were on when I looked up." "Then it just got here." "Vincent, who?" "Wake Mia, quietly. Don't turn on any lights. Don't make a sound. We're leaving in 90 seconds. "What? 90 seconds, Miss Grace? You said nobody followed you. You swore on your daughter's life." "I know what I swore." "You swore, Vincent." I know what I swore." And for the first time since he'd walked through her door, Vincent Moretti's voice cracked with something that sounded dangerously close to panic. "Nobody followed me. I'm certain of it. I drove for an hour. I switched cars. I did every countermeasure I've ever been trained to do, and nobody followed me here, Miss Grace, which means—" He stopped. His whole body went still. "Which means what?" Grace whispered. "Which means somebody told them I was here."
Yeah,
The words hung in the air like smoke. Grace stared at him. "That's impossible," she said. "You only called one person." "You told me. You called your driver. What was his name, Tommy?" "Yes." "And he's the only person who knew you were at my house?" "Yes." Then Grace stopped. Her whole body went cold. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Oh my God, Vincent." "Yes. Your own man, your own driver." "Wake Mia right now, please." But Grace couldn't move, because somewhere in the back of her brain, an even worse thought was crawling its way to the surface. "Vincent, listen to me. If your own man sold you out, then how do you know the car he sends in the morning isn't, it is." "What?" "The car he sends in the morning will have men in it who are going to kill me, Miss Grace. And probably Mia. And almost certainly you, because you saw our faces. Yes. Vincent, get my daughter, please. We don't have time." Grace's body moved before her brain caught up. She ran, not walked, ran to the couch where Mia was sleeping, and gently, so gently, she scooped the little girl into her arms. Mia whimpered, her fever-warm cheek pressed against Grace's neck. Her small fingers curled instinctively into the fabric of Grace's shirt the way a child's fingers do when they trust somebody. Grace felt something split wide open inside her chest. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered. "It's okay, Miss Grace has you." "Back door," Vincent said behind her. "Now." "My car's in the driveway, Vincent, not the back. We are not taking your car." "Then how are we—" "On foot, through the woods, until we hit the next road." "On foot, Vincent. She's 7 years old. She has a fever of 104. I'll carry her. You were shot 3 hours ago. I'll carry her, Miss Grace." And then from the front yard, a car door slammed. Grace froze. Vincent froze. Mia made a small demand in her sleep. "Grace." Vincent's voice was barely a whisper. "Back door. Now. Don't look back. Don't turn on a single light. Do not make a sound." "Vincent, go." She went. She moved through her own house like a ghost, clutching a sleeping child to her chest, passing the kitchen where the eviction notice still sat face up on the table, passing the photograph of her grandmother on the wall, passing everything she had ever called home. And some part of Grace Mitchell understood in that moment that she was never going to see any of it again. Behind her, Vincent moved silently, gun-drawn eyes on the front door. 10 feet from the back door, Grace heard it. Footsteps on her front porch. Slow, heavy, deliberate. A man who is not in any hurry, because a man who is not in any hurry is a man who knows you are trapped. Then a voice. "Vincent." Grace stopped breathing. It was a man's voice, low, friendly, almost warm. "Vincent, it's me. It's Tommy. I know you're in there, boss. Come on out. Bring the kid. Bring the nurse. Let's talk." Grace turned her head slowly and looked at Vincent. His whole face had gone white. Not pale. White. The white of a man who has just heard the voice of someone he trusted his life to someone he had trusted his daughter's life to standing on the other side of his door with a gun. No, Vincent whispered. Just that one word. No. Vincent, Grace started. Go, he said quietly. Get her out. Get her out right now, Miss Grace. Please. You're coming with us. I'm going to buy you time. Vincent. Miss Grace, please save my daughter. Go. She didn't go. She should have. She should have turned and run straight out that back door through the woods with Mia in her arms. She had every reason to. She had no loyalty to Vincent Moretti. She had known him for less than 6 hours. He had lied to her. He had put her life in danger. He had brought a gun into her house and a bullet wound to her kitchen table. But Grace Mitchell did not go. Because Grace Mitchell, in her 34 years on this earth, had buried a husband and a mother and a grandmother, and she had learned one thing about herself along the way. She could not watch another person die if she had the power to stop it. No, she said. Miss Grace. No, you come with us, right now, or I start screaming. You'll wake Mia. Then come with us. Grace of Vincent. He stared at her. She stared back. Outside, Tommy's voice came again, still warm, still friendly, still the voice of a man who had been Vincent's shadow for 15 years. Vincent, don't make me come in there, boss. Come on, open the door. Let's do this the easy way. Vincent closed his eyes, and Grace watched with her heart cracking wide open as the most dangerous man she had ever met made the hardest decision of his life. Back door, he said. Go. They ran. Grace had never run through her own woods at night. She had lived in this house for 6 years, and she had never once had a reason to move through the tree line behind it in total darkness, with a feverish child in her arms and a mafia boss 3 steps behind her. Branches slapped her face. Roots caught her ankles. Mia coughed weakly against her neck, and Grace held her tighter and kept running. Behind her, Vincent was running too. One hand pressed to his bleeding side, the other still holding the gun, and Grace could hear his breathing getting shorter and rougher with every step. Vincent, she whispered. Vincent, the stitches. Keep going. You're bleeding through. Keep going, Miss Grace. Then, from her house, a gunshot. Grace flinched so hard she nearly dropped Mia. Oh, God. They're in the house, Vincent said grimly. They're clearing it room by room. They'll be on our trail in under a minute. A minute. Run faster. I can't. Run faster, Grace. No. They broke through the tree line and stumbled into a soybean field. Grace's lungs were on fire. Mia was whimpering in her sleep. Vincent was a step behind her, and when Grace turned her head to look at him, she saw that the front of his white dress shirt, the shirt she had bled him into, was soaking red all over again. Vincent, I know. The stitches tore. I know. You need a hospital. Not an option. Where are we going? There's a road on the other side of this field. If I can get to that road, I can flag someone down. We'll take their car. Take their car, Vincent. You can't just... Miss Grace, please. I have been doing this my entire life. Please trust me for the next 10 minutes. Grace didn't answer, because what was there to answer? Behind them, a flashlight beam cut through the tree line. There, man's voice shouted. I see them in the field. Run, Vincent breathed. Run. Grace ran. Mia was heavier than she should have been. Grace's arms were burning. Her legs were burning. Her chest was burning. And every time she thought she couldn't run another step, she thought of the little girl's fingers curled into her shirt, and she kept going. Vincent, she gasped. The road? How far? Quarter mile. I can't. Yes, you can. Vincent, give her to me. What? Give her to me, Grace. You can run faster without her. I'll carry her. You're bleeding out. Give her to me. And Grace, because there was no time to argue, because the flashlight beams behind them were getting closer, because Mia was getting heavier with every single step, transferred the sleeping child from her own arms into Vincent's. Vincent staggered. For one terrible second, Grace thought he was going down. Then he found his footing, clutched his daughter to his chest with the kind of strength that comes from somewhere deeper than muscle, and kept running. Go, he said. You go ahead. I'll be right behind you. No, Miss Grace, I am not leaving you in this field, Vincent Moretti. If I fall, you won't fall. And somehow God only knew how they made it to the road. The road was empty. Grace bent over, hands on her knees, lungs heaving, tasting blood at the back of her throat. Vincent leaned against a tree with Mia still in his arms, and even in the dark, Grace could see that his face was the color of milk. Vincent, you have to put her down. No. You're going to, I am not putting my daughter down, Grace. From across the field came the sound of men shouting, and then headlights. A single pair of headlights coming around the bend in the road, heading straight for them. Vincent's free hand went to his gun. Vincent, stand behind me. Vincent, it might be. Stand behind me, Grace. The car slowed. A pickup truck, old, red, the kind of pickup truck that a farmer in his 60s might drive home from the hardware store at 4 in the morning if he had the kind of insomnia that comes with age and loss. The window rolled down. Y'all in trouble, said the old man behind the wheel. Grace nearly sobbed with relief. Sir, she started. Sir, please, there's a little girl, she's… Then the old man's eyes dropped to the blood all over Vincent's shirt, and the gun in Vincent's hand, and his expression changed. Son, Boum, he said slowly, I'm going to need you to drop that firearm. Sir, please, Grace started. Ma'am, I'm talking to the young fella. Vincent didn't drop the gun. We need your truck, he said. I'm sure you do. Sir, please, my daughter is sick. There are your men in that field behind us, and they are going to kill her, and they are going to kill this woman who helped me, and if I don't get out of here in the next 60 seconds. Son, the old man said quietly, I can see all that. Why do you think I slowed down? Then he opened his driver's side door and got out. Take the truck, he said. Keys are in it. Go. Grace stared at him. Sir. Ma'am, my wife passed last spring. My kids don't call. I've got a 12 gauge in the gun cabinet at home, and I am going to walk back to that house right now. And if anyone comes up my driveway looking for this truck, I will handle it. You get that baby to a doctor. You hear me? Grace's eyes flooded. Sir, mate. Go. Oh. Vincent drove. Grace sat in the passenger seat with Mia in her lap. The little girl's cheek pressed against her collarbone, and for the first 10 miles, nobody said a word. They just drove. Grace watched the road disappear under the headlights and tried to understand how her entire life had fallen apart in less than 7 hours. Miss Grace. Yes, Vincent. Thank you. She didn't answer. I know that doesn't cover it, he said quietly. I know nothing I could say could possibly cover it, but I want you to hear me say it anyway. Thank you. For her, for me, for not leaving me in that field. Grace closed her eyes. Vincent. Yes. Where are we going, Saul? Somewhere safe. Where is somewhere safe? There was a long pause. I have a house, Vincent said. An estate, really, about 2 hours from here. Guards, walls, dogs. The Santinos don't know it exists, and neither do most of my own men. Only 3 people know about it. One of them is dead. One of them is my lawyer, and the third one was Tommy. Vincent. Which means if Tommy told them about you, he might have told them about the estate. Yes, Grace opened her eyes. So we can't go there either. We can't go anywhere for a little while, Miss Grace. Not until I figure out who else Tommy sold. They drove in silence for another 10 minutes. Grace stroked Mia's hair. The little girl's breathing had evened out again. The fever Grace noted dully with the back of her nurse's brain had broken somewhere between the field and the truck. Miracles happen in stranger places than you'd think. Vincent. Yes. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you pick my house? I told you, the porch light, the cross. That's not an answer. There are porch lights every half mile on Route 9. There are crosses in half of them. Why my house? Vincent didn't answer for a long moment. Because, he finally said, 2 months ago, a woman named Grace Mitchell pulled a choking child out of a booster seat at a gas station on Route 9. The child belonged to a woman I know. The woman told me about it because she wanted me to know that there were still good people in this world. She gave me your name. She told me where you worked. She told me where you lived. Grace's whole body went cold. Vincent. And when my daughter stopped breathing on that highway tonight, and I was driving blind, and I didn't know where to go, and every hospital was too far, I thought of that story. I thought of the nurse on Route 9. You knew whose house you were coming to. I didn't know it was you by face Grace. I didn't know what you looked like. I didn't know you were a widow. I didn't know about the eviction notice on your kitchen table. But you knew my name. I knew your name. I'm sorry, I should have told you hours ago. Grace stared straight ahead at the road. She didn't know what to feel. She didn't know whether to be furious or grateful or terrified. She didn't know whether Vincent Moretti had sought her out because she was a good nurse, or because she was a desperate woman in a house off a quiet road, or because she was both, and both had made her useful. Vincent, yes, Grace. Is this a job offer? Another long pause. Yes, he said quietly. If you want it to be, it's a job offer. Doing what? Being Mia's nurse. Full-time, live-in. I'll pay you more in a month than you made in a year at the hospital. I'll pay off your mortgage. I'll pay off your grandmother's debts. I'll pay off everything. Vincent, and in exchange you keep my daughter alive. Grace laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a woman whose whole world had collapsed in one night, who was now sitting in a stolen pickup truck with a mafia boss driving to nowhere with his sleeping daughter in her lap. Vincent Moretti, she said, are you trying to hire me? Yes. While we're on the run from your own driver? Yes. At 5 in the morning in a stolen truck? Yes. Vincent almost smiled. I never said I had good timing, Miss Grace. Dean, Grace looked down at Mia, at the little girl's hand still curled in the fabric of her shirt, at the small, trusting breath that rose and fell against her collarbone, at the child who had coughed her way into Grace's house 6 hours ago, and somewhere along the way had coughed her way straight into the center of Grace's heart. And Grace Mitchell understood something she had not understood a single second earlier. She wasn't going to say no. She wasn't going to be able to say no. Not to the money, not to the mortgage, not to the chance at a life she had given up on. And most of all, God help her, not to Mia. Vincent, yes. If I say yes, yes. If I say yes, I have conditions. Name them. 1, you never lie to me again. About anything, ever. Done. 2, whatever happens, whatever your business involves, Mia doesn't see it. Mia doesn't hear it. Mia stays a child for as long as she possibly can. Vincent's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Done. 3, yes. If I ever at any point decide I want to walk away, you let me walk away. You don't stop me. You don't threaten me. You don't send your men after me. Vincent was quiet for a very, very long time. Done, he said finally. Promise me, Vincent. I promise you, Grace. On your daughter's life. On my daughter's life. Grace looked down at Mia. Then yes, she whispered. My answer is yes. And somewhere in the pre-dawn dark, in a stolen pickup truck, heading for a safe house that might or might not be safe, with a bleeding mafia boss behind the wheel and a feverish 7-year-old sleeping in her lap, Grace Mitchell said yes to a life she had not asked for and could not have imagined and would not have believed possible 12 hours ago. Vincent glanced at her. Thank you, Grace. Don't thank me yet. Why not? Grace stared out at the road. Because, she said quietly, I have a feeling the hardest part of tonight hasn't even started. Vincent didn't answer. He just kept driving. And in the rearview mirror, a quarter mile behind them, growing slowly, steadily closer, with every mile a pair of headlights followed, riding dark and patient, the way a predator follows something it has already decided is its. Grace saw them first. She glanced at the side mirror to adjust Mia's blanket, and her whole body went still. Vincent, what? Don't turn your head. Don't do anything. Just look at the rearview mirror. Vincent's eyes flicked up, and for the second time that night, Grace watched the color drain out of his face. How long have they been there? He asked quietly. I don't know. I just saw them. How far back? Quarter mile. Maybe less. Vincent's jaw tightened. His hands closed around the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. That's not possible, he muttered. That's not possible. We switched cars. We drove through a field. Nobody should have been able to pick up that truck. Vincent, unless, he stopped. His whole body went rigid. Unless what? Grace whispered. Unless they didn't pick up the truck at all, Miss Grace. What are you talking about? Vincent's hand left the steering wheel. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into the inside pocket of his blood-stained suit jacket, the one he'd been wearing since she first opened her door and pulled out his wallet. He opened it one-handed on the center console, and then his face changed. It wasn't fear. It was something far, far worse. It was understanding. "What is it?" Grace asked. "Vincent, what is it?" He reached into the billfold of his wallet and pulled something out between two fingers. It was smaller than a grain of rice, a tiny circular silver disc, no bigger than the head of a pin. "Oh my God," Grace whispered. "Is that a tracker?" When did they? "Hours ago, before I ever got to your house. It's in the lining of my wallet. I never even looked." "Vincent, they weren't following me, Grace. They never needed to follow me. They've been watching a dot on a map since the moment I left Connecticut." Grace stared at the tiny disc. Her whole chest was in her throat. "Then why didn't they come sooner? Why didn't they come while we were at my house?" "Because they wanted to see who I'd go to." "What?" "Whoever put this on me wasn't trying to kill me in the first place, Grace. Not right away. They wanted me scared. They wanted me running. They wanted to see where I'd hide and who I'd hide with." Grace felt the air leave her lungs. "They were waiting to see who I'd trust." "Yes. So they could kill everyone in my circle at once." "Yes." Vincent rolled down the driver's side window. He flicked the tracker out into the wind. Then he pressed the accelerator to the floor. The old pickup truck lurched forward. The engine screamed. Mia stirred in Grace's lap and whimpered in her sleep. "Vincent, slow down. The truck can handle it. Vincent, you're bleeding. Your hands are shaking. You need..." Grace, listen to me very carefully. In about 90 seconds, they are going to realize the tracker has gone dark and they're going to floor it. We have one chance to lose them before that happens. Do you understand? Do you understand? Yes, I understand. Good, hold her tight. Grace wrapped both arms around Mia. And Vincent Moretti, bleeding exhausted, running on fumes in fear, drove that old farmer's pickup truck the way a man drives when there is nothing left to lose. The needle climbed past 70, past 80, past 90. Grace had never driven over 75 in her life, and now she was sitting in the passenger seat of a stolen truck, doing 105 down a country road, and at 5 in the morning, clutching a sleeping child while a man with a gunshot wound fought to keep them alive. In the side mirror, the headlights behind them flared suddenly bright, close furious. "They saw it go dark," Vincent said grimly. "Here they come." "Vincent, next left, there's a gravel road. I used it 20 years ago. 20 years ago, Vincent. It's still there, Grace." "How do you know?" "Because it leads to a safe house nobody else knows about. And I need to get my daughter behind a wall. Right now." He took the turn at 50 miles an hour. The truck fishtailed. The back end swung wide. Grace screamed, couldn't help it. A raw, honest scream. And Mia jerked awake in her arms. "Mama," the little girl whimpered. "Mama, where?" "Shh, sweetheart, shh, it's okay." Daddy's driving, baby. Daddy's right here. Hold on to Miss Grace. Hold on tight." The truck straightened. The gravel road disappeared into the trees. And for one brief, impossible moment, there were no headlights behind them. "We lost them," Grace breathed. "No," Vincent said quietly. "We bought a minute, maybe 2. That's it." The gravel road wound for 3 miles. It ended at an old farmhouse. The kind of place a person could drive past 1,000 times and never think twice about collapsed, porch-boarded windows with paint peeling off every surface. Vincent didn't stop at the farmhouse. He drove straight past it into the barn behind it, and only then did he slam on the brakes. "Out," he said. "Grace, out. Now, bring Mia." "Vincent, where are we?" "Out." Grace scrambled out with Mia clutched to her chest. Vincent staggered around the front of the truck, one hand pressed to his side, his face the color of paper. "Vincent, I'm fine." "You're not fine, Vincent. You're bleeding through your shirt, your pants, the whole..." Grace, look at me." She looked at him. "I know I'm not fine," he said quietly. "I've known for an hour, but I need 15 more minutes, just 15. Can you give me that?" Grace didn't answer. She couldn't, because in 15 minutes, Vincent Moretti was going to collapse. She knew it. She'd seen enough bleeding men in her life to know what it looked like when a body was about to quit. Yes, she lied. I can give you 15 minutes. Good. Follow me. He led her through the back of the barn past old hay bales, past the shell of a tractor from 40 years ago, to a wooden hatch in the floor. He bent down, pulled it open, and even that small effort made him gasp in pain and revealed a set of concrete stairs leading down into the dark. Vincent, Vincent, what is this? Safe house. My father built it in 1979. Your father? Grace, I'll explain everything in a minute. Please get Mia down those stairs, please. Grace went down the stairs. It was a bunker. A full bunker caught shelves of canned food water drums, a generator humming in the corner, a wall of weapons she did not want to look at, and a metal door that sealed behind them with a heavy hydraulic hiss. Oh my God, Grace whispered. Oh my God. Yes. Vincent, who are you? You already know who I am. No, I don't. Because the man who walked into my house 6 hours ago could not possibly have this. A bunker, in a barn, in the woods. Vincent, who are you? Vincent sat down heavily on one of the cots. He pressed one hand to his side. When he pulled it away, it came back red. My name is Vincent Moretti, he said quietly. I'm the head of the Moretti family. I control shipping on the northeastern seaboard. My father built this bunker in 1979, 3 weeks before a man named Giuseppe Caruso tried to kill him. The Carusos became the Santinos about 20 years ago after a merger. They've been trying to kill a Moretti for 46 years, Grace. I am the last Moretti. And my daughter Mia, is the one after me. Grace sank onto the cot across from him. 46 years. Yes. This feud has been going on for 46 years. Yes. And Mia is 7, and the only reason she's still alive is because I spent the last 6 years making sure nobody knew she existed. Grace stared at him. Vincent. Yes. What happened to her mother? The silence that followed was the longest silence of Grace's life. Vincent. They killed her, he said quietly, 14 months ago in front of Mia. Grace's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God. Yes. Oh my God, Vincent. Mia didn't speak for 4 months. Not a single word. She slept in my bed for 6. She still won't sleep alone. She has a nanny in Connecticut who, his voice broke. She won't sleep alone. Grace? A 7-year-old girl who watched her mother. He stopped. Grace looked down at Mia, who was curled against her chest, thumb in her mouth, completely asleep. Utterly trustingly asleep in the arms of a woman she'd met 6 hours ago. And Grace felt something crack open in her chest that she didn't know how to crack in it. Vincent. Yes, Grace. I want you to listen to me very carefully. Yes. That little girl is not going to lose anyone else, not on my watch. Vincent looked up at her. His eyes were red. You don't know what you're promising, Grace. I know exactly what I'm promising. You can still walk away. You haven't. Vincent. You haven't signed anything. You haven't taken anything. Nothing is final. You can still. Vincent Moretti. Yes. I said yes an hour ago. I meant it an hour ago. I mean it now. This child is mine to keep alive. Do you understand me? Vincent closed his eyes, and a single silent tear rolled down the face of one of the most feared men on the East Coast. Yes, ma'am, he whispered. I understand. Mafia. The bleeding got worse. Grace didn't have any supplies down in the bunker. Nothing sterile, nothing proper, and Vincent was losing too much blood for amateur stitches to hold. Vincent, listen to me. I need to open that wound back up and cauterize it. Cauterize. I don't have the equipment for real stitches. I don't have antibiotics. I don't have anything except, she looked around the bunker. Her eyes landed on a small camp stove in the corner and a butcher knife lying on the shelf beside it. Vincent saw it too, but Grace, Vincent, you are going to die in this bunker in the next 2 hours if I don't close that wound. Grace, Vincent, he closed his eyes. All right, he whispered. All right, do it. She made him drink 3 inches of cheap vodka she found on one of the shelves. She gave him a leather belt to bite down on. She made Mia face the wall, and the little girl who had woken up briefly and who was so much braver than any 7-year-old should have to be, just nodded and turned her little body toward the cinder block wall and put her hands over her ears. Daddy, Mia whispered. Yes, baby. Are you going to be okay? Yes, baby. Promise, I promise. And Vincent Moretti, who had lied about many things in his life, who had built his entire empire on the art of the lie, looked his 7-year-old daughter in the eye and prayed to God he wasn't lying to her now. "Ready," Grace whispered. "Do it." She did it. She pressed the red-hot blade of that butcher knife against Vincent Moretti's side and held it there for 3 of the longest seconds of her life. Vincent didn't scream. He didn't make a sound. He bit down on the leather belt so hard Grace could hear his teeth creak, and his whole body went white and shaking and rigid. But he did not scream because his daughter was 3 feet away with her hands over her ears, and Vincent Moretti would die before he let Mia hear her father scream. When Grace pulled the knife away, the wound was sealed, ugly, black around the edges, but closed. "There," Grace breathed. It's done, Vincent." Vincent spit out the belt. He was shaking all over. "Mia," he rasped. "Mia, baby, look at Daddy." Mia turned around. Her eyes were huge. "Are you okay, Daddy?" "I'm okay, baby. Miss Grace fixed me." "Miss Grace is a good nurse." Vincent looked at Grace. "Miss Grace is the best nurse," he said quietly. "There isn't a better one in the whole world." Grace had to turn her face away. She did not cry in front of patients. She had not cried in front of a patient in 11 years of nursing. She cried now. Passerera. An hour passed, maybe more. There were no windows in the bunker, no clocks, just the hum of the generator and Vincent's slow, ragged breathing and Mia's soft sleeping sounds against Grace's neck. Grace sat with her back against the concrete wall. Vincent lay on the cot, eyes closed, one hand loosely curled around a pistol resting on his chest. "Miss Grace." "Yes, Vincent." "Are you awake?" "I'm awake." "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Why didn't you run in the field? I told you to run. You didn't." Grace was quiet for a long time. "Because you would have died, Vincent. You don't know me. I knew you enough. I'm a criminal, Grace. I know what you are. I've killed people. I've figured. I run shipments of things I won't say out loud in front of my daughter. I figured that too, Vincent." "Then why didn't you run?" Grace thought about it for a long moment. "Because my grandmother used to tell me something," she said quietly. "When I was little, she used to say, 'Gracie, there are 2 kinds of people in this world. There's the kind who ask what somebody has done before they help them. And there's the kind who help them first and let God figure out the rest.' My grandmother was the second kind, Vincent, and I guess I am too." Vincent didn't answer for a long time. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." "She was. She died 6 months ago." "I'm sorry." "Me too." Another long silence. "Grace?" "Yes." "When we get out of this, when I get Mia somewhere safe, whatever you need you will have. I promise you. The mortgage, the eviction, whatever debts your grandmother left, gone. I will take care of all of it." "Vincent." "No, listen, I owe you my life. I owe you my daughter's life. Twice now. And I am not the kind of man who walks away from a debt like that, Grace. Not ever." Grace didn't answer. She didn't know how. Somewhere around what Grace guessed was 8 in the morning and the generator made a strange noise. A click, a cough, and then silence. The lights in the bunker flickered once, then died. Everything went black. "Vincent," Grace whispered. "I heard it." "The generator." "Yes." "Vincent, why did the generator just—" "Because somebody cut the fuel line." Grace's whole body went cold. As in, "What? The fuel line runs up the floor of the barn, to a tank. If somebody found the tank—" "Vincent, they're above us, Grace." "Vincent, they're in the barn, right now." A small red emergency light flickered on above the bunker door, battery-powered faint casting, everything in the color of blood. Vincent pushed himself up off the cot. His face was gray. His hand was shaking around the pistol. "How many bullets do you have?" Grace whispered. 9. "How many of them are up there?" "I don't know. Probably more than 9. "Vincent." "Grace, listen to me. This bunker has one door. That door is 4 inches of steel. They cannot get through it with anything they're going to be carrying. But they can sit up there for a long time, and they can wait us out. Wait us out. And there's only so much food. And Mia has a fever. And he gestured at his side. I'm not going to last forever, Grace." Grace stared at him. Vincent Moretti, are you telling me we are trapped? Temporarily. Don't you temporarily me, Vincent. Grace, don't you dare temporarily me. Vincent sat back down on the cot. He looked at his daughter sleeping in Grace's arms. I have one option, he said quietly. One call I can make. There's a phone in that cabinet, a landline. It goes to one person and one person only. If I call that person, he will come for us. He will come with enough men to take out whoever is up there, and we will walk out of here alive. Then call him Vincent. Grace. Vincent, call him. Grace, listen to me very carefully. If I call this man, if I make this one phone call, I will owe him. I will owe him a debt that I do not know how I will ever repay. The kind of debt that stays in a family for generations. Do you understand? I don't care, Vincent. You should care. I don't care. Grace. Vincent, your daughter is in my arms. Make the call. Vincent stared at her. And for the first time in 12 hours, maybe for the first time in years, a small, tired, honest smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. All right, he whispered. All right, Miss Grace, I'll make the call. He pushed himself up off the cot. He staggered to the cabinet. He pulled the phone off its cradle, lifted the receiver, and dialed a single number from memory. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and then somebody picked up on the other end. A man's voice. Deep, calm, the kind of voice that doesn't ever have to be raised because the world gets quiet on its own when he starts speaking. Vincent, the voice said. Just that. Just the name. Like the man on the other end had been waiting 14 months for this exact phone call. It's me, Vincent had said quietly. I need help. I have my daughter with me. And a woman. We're in the bunker on the old Hollister property. Santino's men are above us. A long pause on the other end. Then, I'll be there in 40 minutes. Thank you. Vincent. Yes. You know what this means. I know. Say it. Vincent closed his eyes. I know what it means. The line went dead. Vincent stood there for a long moment, phone still in his hand. Then he turned and looked at Grace. Who was that? She whispered. Vincent set the receiver back in the cradle. His name, he said quietly, is Salvatore Moretti. Who is Salvatore Moretti? Vincent's eyes were very, very tired. My father, he said. The man I have not spoken to in 11 years. The man I swore on my mother's grave I would never ever ask for help. And in the dim red light of that bunker, with a feverish child asleep in her arms and a bleeding Mafia boss in front of her, Grace Mitchell understood with a slow, cold certainty that whatever she had said yes to a few hours ago, whatever future she had tied her life to in the cab of a stolen pickup truck, had just gotten very, very much bigger than she had ever imagined. Grace didn't speak for a long time. She sat on the concrete floor of that bunker with a sleeping child in her arms, and she watched Vincent Moretti, the man she'd stitched up at her kitchen table, the man she'd followed through a soybean field at 4 a.m, the man she'd cauterized with a butcher knife in a bunker. Nobody was ever supposed to stand completely still beside a phone that had just connected him to the one person on this earth he'd sworn he would never speak to again. Vincent, she finally whispered. Yes. You told me your father was dead. I did. You specifically told me, an hour ago. You said only 3 people knew about this bunker, and one of them was dead. I know what I said, Grace. So either you lied to me, I didn't lie to you, or your father is dead to you. Vincent closed his eyes. Yes, he said quietly. The second one. Grace waited. Vincent sat back down on the cot. My father, he began and then stopped and then started again. My father is 81 years old. He stepped down from the family 11 years ago. He lives in a house in the Hudson Valley with 6 men and a housekeeper, and he has not spoken to me since the day my mother died. Why? Because he blames me for it. Grace went still. Vincent, my mother had a heart condition. She needed a surgery. The surgery was scheduled in Boston. I was supposed to drive her. Vincent's voice had gone flat, not cold, not angry, just flat in the way a man's voice goes flat when he has told himself the same story too many times to feel it anymore. The night before the drive, there was a situation. With one of my shipments, I sent a driver in my place. The driver was ours. He was trusted. He had been with the family for 20 years. He got my mother to the hospital on time. He even waited in the lobby during the surgery. Vincent? The surgery went fine, Grace. My mother was recovering. She was sitting up. She was going to come home in 3 days. And on the second day, he swallowed. On the second day, a man walked into her hospital room with a silenced pistol, and he shot my mother 3 times in the chest while she was eating a bowl of pudding. Grace's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God. Yes. Vincent. The driver, the man I'd trusted, had sold her location to the Carusos for $90,000. That was what my mother's life was worth to a man who had eaten at our table every Sunday for 2 decades. $90,000. Oh, Vincent, my father has not forgiven me, Miss Grace. Not for being elsewhere. Not for sending the driver. Not for anything. In his mind, if I had driven my mother myself, I would have seen the signs I was supposed to see. I would have caught what I was supposed to catch. My mother would still be alive. Grace didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. She just held Mia a little tighter and watched a man she barely knew carry a weight she could not possibly imagine. And now he's coming, Grace finally said. Yes. For you. No, Grace, not for me. Then eat after. He's coming for Mia. Vincent looked up at her. His eyes in the red emergency light were so tired Grace wasn't sure how he was still upright. My father has never met his granddaughter, Miss Grace. He's seen photographs. That's all. In 11 years, he has never laid eyes on her. He didn't come to her christening. He didn't come to her mother's funeral. He hasn't sent a single birthday card. Vincent's voice cracked. But the moment he heard Mia was in this bunker, he said 40 minutes. He didn't ask a single question. He didn't make a single condition. He just said 40 minutes. Grace stared at him. Vincent. Yes. What did he mean when he said, you know what this means? Vincent took a long, slow breath. It means, he said quietly, that the moment he walks into this bunker, I am no longer the head of the Moretti family. What? It means he is coming out of retirement to save his granddaughter, to take back the organization, and to fix what I apparently could not. Vincent, that's your life. Your whole life. You built, I know what I built, Grace. And you're just I'm going to hand it to him, yes. Why? Vincent looked at his daughter, sleeping, breathing evenly, safe for now in a stranger's arms. Because he can protect her better than I can, he said quietly. And because my pride is not worth my daughter's life. It's as simple as that, Grace. As simple as that. Grace's eyes burned. She looked down at Mia. And for the first time in this long, terrible night, she understood something about Vincent Moretti that no one in his entire empire had probably ever understood. He was before anything else, a father. How long? She whispered. About 35 more minutes. And the men above us, they won't know what hit them. Vincent. Yes. Is your father going to kill them? Vincent didn't answer. Vincent turned. Miss Grace. Vincent Moretti, is your father going to kill those men? Yes, he said simply. He is. Grace closed her eyes. She didn't know what she felt. Relief, maybe? Horror, definitely. But also, and this was the part that scared her, a kind of quiet, exhausted acceptance. 18 hours ago, she had been a nurse. 18 hours ago, she would have called 911 at the first drop of blood. 18 hours ago, she would have been physically incapable of sitting in a concrete bunker and accepting that a man's father was about to murder strangers above her head. But those 18 hours had changed her. Mia had changed her. And the world Grace Mitchell had belonged to at sunset yesterday was gone now, and she knew it. Vincent. Yes. When your father gets here. Yes. What happens to me? Vincent turned his head and looked at her. That depends on you, Grace. On me. Yes, my father is a very thorough man. When he walks into this bunker and sees you here, he is going to ask me one question. He is going to look you in the eye and he is going to ask me whether you stay or go. Whether I stay or go. Yes. Vincent, what does that mean? Vincent was quiet for a long moment. It means, he said slowly, that if I tell him you are not one of us, if I tell him you were just a nurse who helped me on a bad night, my father will give you a very large sum of money and a new identity in a new city, and you will never see me or my daughter again. Okay. And if I tell him you are one of us, Vincent stopped. Then what, Vincent? Then you will never be able to leave again, Grace. You will be in this life for good. You will be a Moretti by association. You will live behind walls. You will have a guard. The government will have a file on you. The other families will know your name. Do you understand? Grace's breath caught. So the choice isn't really mine. It is Grace. That's the whole point. My father won't ask me anything until he hears what you want first. Grace looked down at Mia, at the little girl's face soft with sleep, a faint blush of fever still in her cheeks. At the small fingers still curled, still after all these hours into the fabric of Grace's shirt, like the little girl had decided somewhere in her small unconscious mind that Grace was not something to let go of. Vincent, yes. If I go, yes. I will never see her again. Vincent's voice was very quiet. No. No card on her birthday. No call, no letter. No Grace. She'll just wake up one morning and I won't be there and she won't understand why. Grace, I will never ask you to Vincent Moretti. Yes. You tell your father I stay. Vincent's eyes flooded. Grace, you tell him Vincent. Grace, are you sure? Because once it's done, it's done. I said yes in the truck. I meant it in the bunker. I am saying it again now. I stay. Vincent pressed the heel of his hand to his eyes. And for the second time that night, Grace Mitchell watched the most dangerous man she had ever met weep without making a sound. They waited. Somewhere above them in the dark of the barn, men were waiting, two men who didn't know yet that the Moretti patriarch himself was on his way, men who thought they were minutes away from kicking down a bunker door and finishing a 46-year-old feud. Those men had no idea what was coming. Mia stirred. Miss Grace. Yes, sweetheart. I'm hungry. Grace smiled. It was a small, cracked, exhausted smile, but it was a real one, the first real one she'd worn since the knock on her door. Let's see what we can find, honey. She carried Mia over to the shelves of canned food. She found an unexpired can of peaches. She found a plastic spoon. She sat Mia down on a cot and fed her one slow bite at a time while Vincent watched them with an expression Grace couldn't quite read. Is this an adventure? Mia asked between bites. Grace's throat closed up. Yes, baby, she whispered. This is an adventure. Are we being the brave ones? We're being the very bravest ones, Mia. My daddy is the bravest. Your daddy, Grace said, glancing at Vincent, is the second bravest. You are the bravest. And I'm the third bravest. That's how our team works. Mia giggled. It was the first sound Grace had heard her make that wasn't sick or scared or sleeping. It was a 7-year-old's giggle, a real one. And Vincent Moretti across the bunker closed his eyes and pressed the heel of his hand to his forehead, and Grace understood in that quiet moment that he had not heard his daughter giggle in a very, very long time. Vincent? Yes. How long in now? 15 minutes. Can they hear us down here? The men above? No. Good. Grace was quiet for a moment. Vincent. Yes, Grace. Tell me something. Anything. Tell me something about her mother. Vincent's hand went still on the cot. Grace watched him very carefully. I'm sorry, she said. If it's too... No, it's nobody ever asks. Not anymore. Everyone is so afraid to say her name in front of Mia that we all just stopped saying it. At all. What was her name? Elena. Elena. Yes. That's a beautiful name. Vincent smiled. It was the smallest, saddest smile Grace had ever seen. She was a dancer, he said quietly. That's what she was before she met me. Ballet. Professional. She danced with a company in the city. She had a scar on her left ankle from when she was 19, and she was so embarrassed by it, she never wore skirts that came above it. Not once. In 15 years. Grace smiled. She made the worst coffee I have ever tasted in my entire life, Vincent continued. Truly, offensively bad. Every morning for the first 4 years we were married, I pretended. And then one day she caught me spitting it into the sink, and she laughed so hard she cried. After that, I made the coffee. Grace laughed too. She couldn't help it. She would have liked you, Grace. You don't know that. I do know that. How fine. Vincent looked at her. Because Elena trusted her instincts about people the way you trust yours about patients, he said. She would have taken one look at you on my kitchen floor tonight and said, Vincent, this one. This is a good one. You keep this one close. That's exactly what she would have said. Grace's eyes burned. She looked away. Vincent, yes. When did you stop talking about her with Mia? He was quiet for a long time. The day of the funeral, he said quietly. Mia asked me if Mommy was ever coming back. And I said, no, baby. Mommy isn't coming back. And she started to cry. And she cried for hours. And I couldn't do it, Grace. I couldn't say her name again after that. I thought if I stopped saying it, maybe Mia would stop asking. Maybe she'd hurt less. Vincent, yes. That wasn't for her. That was for you. Vincent closed his eyes. I know, he whispered. I know it was. Grace looked down at Mia. Then we fix it, she said. Grace, we fix it, Vincent. Starting tonight, you say her name. Mia says her name. She was Elena, and she danced, and she made terrible coffee, and she would have liked me, and that little girl deserves to grow up hearing her mother's name out loud. Vincent wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand. Yes, ma'am. Away. 8 minutes later, they heard it. The first shot, then another, and another, and then a whole cascade of them muffled through the concrete, distant wrong, in the way distant gunfire is always wrong. Mia flinched against Grace's chest and started to whimper. Shh, baby, shh. That's a good noise. It doesn't sound like a good noise. It's Grandpa, Vincent said quietly. Mia froze. Her little head came up slowly. Grandpa, yes, baby. My grandpa, yes. The one in the pictures with the big mustache. That's the one. Is he here? He's upstairs right now, baby. He came to get us. He came to take us somewhere safe. Mia's eyes were huge. I've never met him. I know, baby. Will he like me? Vincent's voice broke completely. Oh, baby, he whispered. Oh, baby, he is going to love you. The gunfire above them lasted for 43 seconds. Grace counted. She didn't mean to. Her brain just did it the way a nurse's brain always counts things in a crisis. 43 seconds. Then silence. Then footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps coming down the bunker stairs. Vincent stood up. He gripped his pistol. He moved in front of Grace and Mia, placing himself between them and the door, and Grace understood with a small, awful ache that even bleeding, even half dead on his feet, Vincent Moretti would die before he let anyone reach his daughter. There was a knock. 3 slow, even knocks. Vincent closed his eyes. Who is it? He called out. A pause. And then from the other side of the door, a deep, calm voice that made Vincent's whole body go still. It's your father, Vincent. Vincent's hand trembled around the pistol. Open the door, son. Vincent didn't move. Vincent. Yes, Papa. Open the door. Slowly, so slowly, Grace could see every single thing it cost him. Vincent Moretti reached out and turned the hydraulic lock on the bunker door. The door opened, and for the first time in 11 years, Vincent Moretti stood face to face with his father. The man in the doorway was older than Grace had expected. He was also smaller than she had expected. She didn't know why she'd imagined him to be big. Maybe because in her head, the father of a man like Vincent had to be a giant. But the man in the doorway was short, wiry, 81 years old and walking with a slight limp, his white hair combed back, a long dark coat hanging off his thin frame. He had Vincent's eyes. Or Grace corrected herself, Vincent had his. Papa, Vincent said. Vincent? They stared at each other for a long, long time. Then Salvatore Moretti stepped into the bunker. And very, very slowly, without breaking eye contact with his son, he reached out one gnarled old hand and he touched Vincent's face. Just touched it. One hand, one palm, against his son's cheek. My boy, the old man whispered. And Vincent Moretti, the Mafia boss, the killer, the man who had held a gun steady while being cauterized with a butcher knife, broke. He broke completely. He fell against his father's chest like a child, and Salvatore Moretti wrapped his thin arms around his son, and the two of them stood there in that bunker doorway holding each other, while Grace Mitchell looked away, because some moments are not meant to be watched by strangers. When they finally pulled apart, Salvatore's eyes found Mia, and something Grace would never forget as long as she lived softened in the old man's whole body. Is this her? He whispered. Yes, Papa. My granddaughter. Yes. Salvatore took one slow step forward. Mia shrank back against Grace. Mia, baby, Vincent said gently. This is your grandfather. This is my papa. He wanted to meet you for a very long time. Mia looked up at Grace. She looked up at her with those huge brown eyes, like she was asking permission. Like Grace, who had known her for 18 hours, was somehow the person she looked to now for what was safe and what wasn't. Grace's heart cracked clean in half. It's okay, sweetheart, she whispered. He's family. Mia looked back at Salvatore. Slowly, so slowly, she slid off Grace's lap and took one small step forward. Salvatore Moretti, a man who had ordered more killings in his lifetime than the FBI had ever proven, lowered himself onto one trembling old knee in front of his 7-year-old granddaughter. Hello, Mia. Hi. Do you know who I am? You're my grandpa. Yes. My daddy said you have a mustache. Salvatore laughed. It was a creaky, rusty, beautiful sound. I did, Bambina. I did have a mustache. Your grandmother made me shave it. Grandma Elena. Salvatore's eyes flooded. No, baby. Your other grandmother. My wife. Her name was Rosa. Oh, is she here too? Salvatore swallowed hard. No, baby. No. Rosa is in heaven with your mama. Mia thought about this. Then, without warning, without any of the hesitation Grace had expected, without any of the fear a child who had seen what this child had seen should have felt, Mia stepped forward and put her small arms around her grandfather's neck. Salvatore Moretti, patriarch of the Moretti family, killer, godfather, 81 years old, closed his eyes and wrapped his arms around his granddaughter and held her like she was the last precious thing on this entire earth. Grace had to turn her face away. Vincent saw her. He reached out very gently and took her hand, just held it. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For her, for this, for all of it. Grace couldn't answer. She didn't trust her voice. After a long moment, Salvatore eased Mia back and stood up. He looked past his son, and for the first time his eyes landed fully on Grace. The old man studied her. He studied her the way a man studies a chessboard, slow, careful, weighing every single piece. Then he looked at Vincent. Son, Salvatore said quietly. Yes, Papa. Does she stay, or does she go? The whole bunker went silent. Grace held her breath. Vincent looked at her, then at Mia, who was clinging to her grandfather's coat, but whose eyes were still fixed on Grace, the way a 7-year-old's eyes fix on the one person in the room they have decided belongs to them. Then back at his father. She stays, Papa. Salvatore nodded once. Then she is family, the old man said, from this moment. He turned and looked at Grace. Grace Mitchell. Yes, sir. Welcome to the family. Grace couldn't speak. She just nodded. And somewhere deep inside her chest, Grace Mitchell, widow, nurse, 34, $32 in her checking account. One kind gesture to a stranger understood that the woman she had been 18 hours ago, standing in her kitchen, holding an eviction notice, was a woman who no longer existed. That woman was gone. And the woman standing here in a bunker under a barn in the middle of nowhere with a feverish child's small hand wrapped around 2 of her fingers, and a Mafia patriarch calling her family, that woman was brand new. And she did not yet know her own name. Salvatore turned toward the bunker stairs. Come, he said quietly, all of you. It's time to go home. The drive to the Moretti estate took 2 hours. Grace sat in the back of a black SUV, with Mia asleep in her lap and Vincent beside her, his hand resting a few inches from hers on the leather seat, not touching, not quite, but close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Salvatore sat in the front passenger seat, his old hands folded in his lap, speaking quietly into a phone in a language Grace didn't understand. She didn't ask what he was saying. She already knew. He was giving orders. About Tommy, about the men above the bunker, about the ones who were still out there. And somewhere on the other end of that phone, things were being set in motion that Grace Mitchell was not supposed to know about. Grace? Yes, Vincent. You're quiet. I'm thinking. About what? She looked down at Mia. About how a week ago I was deciding whether to pay the electric bill or buy groceries. Vincent was silent for a moment. And now I'm being driven to an estate by an 81-year-old man who just killed 6 people for me. 7, Salvatore said from the front seat without looking back. Grace blinked. 7. There were 7, Signora, not 6. Forgive my son. He's been bleeding. He can't count. Vincent let out a small, exhausted laugh, and Grace, against every single instinct she had about the world she used to live in, laughed too. The estate was not what she had imagined. She had imagined marble, pillars, wrought iron gates. She had imagined the kind of house a mafia patriarch lives in movies. What she got was a farmhouse, a big farmhouse, white, 2 stories, a wraparound porch with rocking chairs, a barn in the back with horses in it, an old golden retriever that limped out to meet them when the SUV pulled up the drive, tail thumping lazily against the gravel. Vincent, yes, Grace, this is your father's house. This is where I grew up. You grew up here? Yes, ma'am. Vincent, this is a farm. We have a farm, Miss Grace. We have always had a farm. My mother raised tomatoes. Grace didn't know why, but that single sentence, "my mother raised tomatoes," made her eyes flood all over again. She didn't know what she had expected a mafia family to be, but she had not expected tomatoes. She had not expected a limping golden retriever. She had not expected rocking chairs on a wraparound porch. She had not expected any of it to feel so much like home. A woman met them at the door. She was in her 60s, gray hair, a flour-smudged apron tied around her waist. She took one look at Vincent, at the bloody shirt, the hollow eyes, the weight loss of a man who had been bleeding for 12 hours, and her whole face crumpled. "Vincenzo," she whispered. "Anna. Vincenzo mio." She put both hands on his face. She kissed his forehead. She kissed his cheeks. And Vincent, this man who had held a pistol steady while Grace cauterized him with a butcher knife, stood very still and let her do it. Then her eyes landed on Mia, and Anna burst into tears. "Bambina," she sobbed. "Oh, Bambina, Bambina Mia, look at you. Look at you." "Who are you?" Mia asked shyly. "I'm Auntie Anna, baby. I'm your grandfather's housekeeper. I held you when you were 1 week old. You won't remember. But I remember. I remember every minute of it." "You knew my mama," Anna's hands trembled. "Yes, Bambina, I knew your mama. I made her wedding cake. I made her," Anna's voice cracked, "I made her every meal she ate in this house. For 3 years. Was she nice?" "She was the nicest person I have ever met in my life, Bambina. She was an angel. Your mama was an angel." Mia thought about this very carefully. Then, with the solemnity only a 7-year-old can manage, she said, "I think my mama is still an angel. Just a different kind now." Anna covered her mouth with her flour-smudged hand, and Grace Mitchell, standing 3 feet away with a blood-stained shirt and a nurse's bag and absolutely no idea what world she had walked into, realized she was going to spend the rest of her life fighting to keep that child safe, and she was going to do it gladly. Isha. Anna took Mia upstairs for a bath. Vincent sank into a chair at the kitchen table. Salvatore poured him 3 fingers of whiskey without asking. Then he poured one for Grace. "Signora." "Thank you, Mr. Moretti." "Salvatore." "Thank you, Salvatore." He sat down across from her. "Drink, Signora. It's been a long night." Grace drank. It burned. She hadn't had whiskey since her husband's funeral. It was the same brand. She wondered if the old man had chosen it on purpose and decided he probably had men like Salvatore Moretti didn't do anything by accident. "Grace, parlato." "Yes, Salvatore. I would like to speak with you alone, if my son will permit it." Vincent didn't look up from his glass. "Papa." "Yes." "Don't scare her." "I will not scare her, Vincenzo. I will only speak with her." Vincent nodded once. He pushed himself up, winced, steadied, and limped out of the kitchen, one hand pressed to his side. "He needs a doctor," Grace murmured. "A doctor is coming, Signora. He'll be here within the hour. Now, sit, drink, speak with me." Salvatore Moretti folded his old hands around his glass. "Grace Mitchell." "Yes, sir." "Tell me about your grandmother." Grace blinked. My grandmother." "Yes." "Why, humor an old man, Signora." Grace set down her glass. "Her name was Eleanor. She was a nurse like me. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 6. She worked 3 jobs. She never missed a single parent-teacher conference. She died 6 months ago of a stroke, and I have been trying to hold on to her house ever since, and I have been failing." Salvatore nodded slowly. "Grace." "Yes." "Your grandmother, Eleanor Mitchell, in 1972, did she work at St. Vincent's Hospital in Queens?" Grace's whole body went still. What? I am asking you, Senora, if she worked there. Yes, she did. That was her first nursing job. And in October of 1972, was there a night she came home very late and she would not speak about it? Grace stared at him. How? How could you possibly? Salvatore Moretti reached into the inside pocket of his coat. He pulled out a photograph. It was old, yellowed. The edges were soft from being handled. He slid it across the table. In the photograph, a young woman in a nurse's uniform stood beside a hospital bed. On the bed lay a young man bandaged across the chest, his eyes half closed. The young woman was smiling. The young man was looking up at her like she'd just hung the moon. The young woman was Grace's grandmother. The young man on the bed was Salvatore Moretti. Oh my God, Grace whispered. In October of 1972, Salvatore said quietly, I was shot 3 times in an alley in Queens. I was 27 years old. I should not have survived the night. The nurse who kept me alive was a young woman named Eleanor Mitchell. She worked on me for 6 hours. She never asked my name. She never asked how I'd been shot. She stitched me up, she held my hand, and when the doctors wanted to call the police, she told them she had already called and they were on their way. She was lying. She never called anyone. Grace couldn't breathe. She saved my life, Senora, 54 years ago. A woman I did not know who owed me nothing, who did not ask a single question about the kind of man she was saving. She saved my life, and then she went home, and she never spoke of it. Not to anyone. She never told me. She would not have, Senora. Women like your grandmother do not speak of things like that. They just do them. And they go home, and they make dinner. Grace's eyes filled. Salvatore? Yes. Why are you telling me this? The old man looked at her. Because, Senora, when my son called me tonight from that bunker, and he told me the name of the nurse who had saved my granddaughter, I knew. The moment I heard your name, I knew. The world is not as big as it pretends to be, Grace Mitchell, and blood remembers blood even when it skips a generation. Grace pressed her hands over her face. She didn't know what to feel. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry or stand up and walk out and never come back. 54 years. Her grandmother had saved the life of the man sitting across from her 54 years ago in an alley in Queens and had never told a soul. And now here Grace sat Eleanor's granddaughter at the same man's kitchen table, having just saved his son and his granddaughter. Some lives are circles. Her grandmother used to say that. Grace had never understood what she meant until right this second. Salvatore. Yes, Signora. My grandmother, did she know who you were? I do not believe she did, Grace. I believe she simply saw a young man who was dying, and she decided that was enough. Yes, Grace whispered. Yes, that sounds like her. She was a magnificent woman, Signora. She was. And her granddaughter, Salvatore said quietly, is cut from the same cloth. Grace wiped her eyes. The doctor came. Vincent's wound was sewn properly. He was put on an IV antibiotic drip. He was ordered by a man who could not be argued with to spend the next 3 days in bed. Vincent, who could argue with almost anyone, did not argue with this doctor. Grace was shown to a bedroom upstairs. A guest room, clean sheets, windows that overlooked the barn, a closet already stocked with clothes in her exact size, which told Grace more than anything else that Salvatore Moretti had been planning for her arrival before she had ever agreed to come. She stood in that bedroom for a long time, just staring at the bed. She hadn't slept in 29 hours. A small knock came at the door. Miss Grace? It was Mia, in pajamas. Freshly bathed, hair still damp. She looked smaller and pinker and more like a regular child than Grace had ever seen her. Yes, sweetheart. Auntie Anna made me brush my teeth. Good girl. Miss Grace. Yes, Mia. Can I sleep with you tonight? Grace's heart broke clean in half. Baby, your grandpa made you a whole room. I bet it's... I don't know the room. I know, sweetheart, and I don't know Auntie Anna. She seems very... But I know you. Grace couldn't speak. Mia stood in the doorway in her little pink pajamas with her damp hair curling around her face, and she looked up at Grace Mitchell with the patient certainty of a child who had already made her decision. I know you, Miss Grace. Come here, baby. Mia climbed up into the bed. She crawled under the covers. She pressed her small face into Grace's shoulder, and within 90 seconds, she was asleep. Grace stayed awake. She stayed awake and stared at the ceiling and held the sleeping child against her and understood with a slow, quiet certainty that whatever else happened for the rest of her life, this child was hers now. Not biologically, not legally, but in every way that mattered. Mia was hers, and she would die before anyone took her away. 3 days passed. Vincent healed, slowly, painfully. He sat on the porch in the mornings with a blanket across his lap, and Grace would bring him coffee, and they would not speak for long stretches. And sometimes the silence between them was the warmest thing Grace had felt in years. On the fourth day, Salvatore got a phone call. He took it in his study. When he came out, his face was very, very still. Vincent. Yes, Papa. They found Tommy. Vincent went still. Where? Connecticut. He is being driven here as we speak. Grace looked up from her coffee. Here, Vincent, they're bringing him here. Vincent didn't answer. Vincent, what does that mean? He still didn't answer. Salvatore looked at her. It means, Signora, that there are some things that are family matters. Salvatore, you will not see him, Grace. You will not hear him. You will stay in the house with Mia, and by tomorrow morning the matter will be concluded. Grace's throat closed up. Salvatore, is he... Signora, you asked me once in that bunker if I was going to kill the men above us. I told you yes. You did not flinch. Tommy Leone sold a 7-year-old girl to the Santinos for $200,000, Signora. He delivered her location knowing what they would do to her. Do you understand what I am telling you? Grace's hand shook around her coffee. Yes. Good. That night, Grace put Mia to bed. She read her a story. She tucked her in. She kissed her forehead. Miss Grace. Yes, baby. Is my daddy okay? Your daddy is okay, sweetheart. Are the bad men gone? Grace took a long, slow breath. Yes, baby, the bad men are going away tonight. Forever. Forever, sweetheart. Good. Mia was quiet for a moment. Then Miss Grace. Yes, Mia. Are you going to stay? Grace's throat closed up. Yes, sweetheart, I'm going to stay. For always, baby. Promise, I promise. Mia nodded satisfied and closed her eyes. Within a minute, she was asleep. Grace stood in the doorway of her bedroom for a long time, watching the small rise and fall of her chest, and understood that she had just made a promise she was going to keep for the rest of her natural life. She found Vincent on the porch. He was sitting in one of the rocking chairs, a glass of whiskey in one hand, the old golden retriever asleep at his feet. Grace, Vincent, sit down, please. She sat. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They just rocked. The dog snored. The wind moved through the fields. Grace, yes. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Thank you. For my life, for my daughter's life. For my father, I didn't know until you came how much I had missed him, how much I had lost him. Vincent, I don't know how to thank a person for that, Grace. I don't have the words. Men like me, we don't have those words. We were never taught them. Grace looked down at her hands. Vincent, yes, you don't have to thank me. I do. You don't because I didn't do any of it for thanks. Why did you do it then? Grace was quiet for a long time. Because a little girl needed a nurse, she said, and I was the nurse. Vincent looked at her. She looked back. And in that long, slow rocking silence with the baby snoring at their feet and the wind moving through the fields and a 7-year-old girl sleeping safe upstairs, something passed between them that didn't need to be named yet. Not tonight, maybe not for a long time, but it was there, and they both knew it. So, 6 weeks later, Grace Mitchell stood in a courthouse in upstate New York, signing papers that made her Mia Moretti's legal guardian, not instead of Vincent, but alongside him, a second name on every medical form, every school form, every emergency contact sheet, for as long as the little girl needed her. Vincent watched her sign. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The Santino family did not bother them again. Grace never asked what happened, and Salvatore never told her, but there came a morning when the old man came down to breakfast and kissed his granddaughter on the top of her head and said very quietly to no one in particular, "It is finished." And it was. Grace kept her grandmother's house. Salvatore bought it outright in cash the week after Tommy was dealt with. He had the deed put in Grace's name and the mortgage papers burned in the fireplace. Grace didn't live there anymore. But she went back now and then once a month, sometimes twice, and sat on the porch where her grandmother used to sit and watch the sun set over the quiet dirt road of Route 9. The eviction notice was the first thing she burned. The second was a photograph she had of her grandmother from 1972 in a nurse's uniform that she had never understood until now. The third was her fear. A year later, on a Tuesday evening, Mia turned 8. Anna made a cake. Salvatore wore his good jacket. The golden retriever limped around the kitchen begging for scraps. And Vincent, fully healed, now standing straight, again smiling in a way Grace had not seen him smile in the entire first 6 months she had known him, lit the candles. Mia closed her eyes to make a wish. "What did you wish for, baby?" Vincent asked. "I'm not supposed to tell Daddy." "Oh, that's right." Mia opened her eyes, then she looked at Grace. "But I already got it." Grace's eyes flooded. "Baby, I wish that Miss Grace would stay forever." And then I remembered she already said she would, so the wish already came true. Salvatore wiped his eyes with a handkerchief he pretended was for his nose. Vincent reached across the table. He took Grace's hand, not a squeeze, not a pat, just held it. And Grace Mitchell, 35 years old now, nurse, guardian, widow, family, understood something that her grandmother had understood 54 years ago in an alley in Queens. Sometimes the world breaks open and a stranger walks through the gap. And sometimes you help that stranger without knowing what you're doing. And sometimes, just sometimes, that stranger turns out to be the reason your whole life was waiting. A year after that, Grace and Vincent were married on the wraparound porch. Mia was the flower girl. Salvatore walked Grace down the aisle because he said a woman who had no father to give her away deserved one who had been waiting 54 years for the chance. Anna cried through the whole ceremony. The golden retriever wore a bow tie. Grace wore her grandmother's wedding dress altered by Anna's own hands. She was the third bride to wear it. None of the first two had been Moretti's. She was. Sure. And years later, when Mia was grown and had children of her own, and her children asked how Grandma Grace had come into the family, Mia would sit them down on that same wraparound porch, and she would tell them the story. She would tell them about a storm. She would tell them about a knock on a door. She would tell them about a woman who had $32 in her bank account and an eviction notice on her kitchen table, and who had opened her door anyway. And she would tell them the thing Grandma Grace always said, the thing she had stitched into a pillow on the living room couch, the thing she had told Mia 1,000 times growing up. In this life, the test always comes dressed up as something you'd rather say no to. So you open the door. You open it every time. Because on the other side of it is the life you were meant to have. Grace Mitchell opened the door. She opened it when she had nothing left to give. She opened it when every voice in her head told her to keep it shut. She opened it because a child was crying in the rain, and nurses do not let children die on doorsteps, and women who were raised by Eleanor Mitchell do not ask what a stranger has done before they help him. And on the other side of that door, soaked in rain, bleeding, clutching a sick little girl, was the rest of her life. One kind gesture. That was all it took. One kind gesture to a stranger, and Grace Mitchell's whole world turned upside down and then right side up for the very first time. That is how she lost everything she thought she wanted. And that is how she found everything she was meant to have. And that, dear friends, is the end of the story.